Welcome to commercial trucking, a hidden world governed by rules so bizarre they sound entirely made up. We are revealing 50 of the most baffling and ridiculous trucking laws hiding in plain sight. Prepare to discover a completely unseen world of highway bureaucracy that will leave you absolutely speechless. 1. In states like New Jersey, truckers face a maddening legal paradox known as strict anti-idling laws. You can literally be slapped with a massive fine for keeping your engine running for more than 3 minutes while parked. But here is the kicker. Federal law mandates that drivers take specific rest breaks, often in extreme weather. So, you are legally required to sleep in your metal box, but legally forbidden from running the engine to power your heater or air conditioner. Would you survive a freezing night in a truck just to please a local bureaucrat? 2. The federal hours of service regulations require truckers to become amateur mathematicians just to take a nap. The split sleeper berth rule dictates that a driver can split their mandatory 10-hour rest period into 2 shifts, but only if one is exactly 7 to 8 hours and the other is 2 to 3 hours, and neither counts against the 14-hour driving window. If they miscalculate this convoluted algebra by even 5 minutes, they are legally driving a commercial vehicle while fatigued. Make sense to you? 3. A trucker's most common safety tool is often legally considered a deadly weapon. To check tire pressure quickly, drivers hit the thick rubber with a heavy wooden club called a tire thumper. It sounds like a perfectly practical solution, right? But if a driver gets pulled over in states like California or New York, an aggressive officer can suddenly classify that piece of wood as an illegal billy club. Drivers have literally been arrested for possessing a blunt force weapon while simply trying to perform a federally mandated vehicle inspection. 4. You might think mud flaps are just a courteous accessory, but in Texas, they are a matter of intense legal scrutiny. The law explicitly states that a commercial truck's mud flaps must reach to within 8 inches of the highway surface, not 9 inches, not 10. 8. A state trooper can actually pull over an 18-wheeler, pull out a literal measuring tape, and write a hefty ticket if the rubber flap is slightly too short due to a heavy load compressing the suspension. Imagine explaining to your boss that you were delayed by a measuring tape. 5. Finding a safe place to park a massive semi-truck is a national nightmare. When truck stops fill up by late afternoon, exhausted drivers are often forced to park on highway off-ramps to comply with their federally mandated sleep schedules. However, most states strictly outlaw ramp parking. This traps drivers in an unwinnable scenario. Keep driving and break federal exhaustion laws, or park on the ramp and get ticketed by state highway patrols. It is a legal game of musical chairs where the trucker always loses. 6. If you are hauling standard freight, your driving hours are tracked to the exact minute by a digital overlord known as an electronic logging device. But if you are hauling agricultural products or livestock within a specific radius of the source, those strict federal fatigue rules suddenly vanish into thin air. Apparently, the government believes that being in close proximity to a truckload of fresh corn magically prevents human exhaustion. Why does a tomato get a free pass on highway safety while a load of electronics does not? 7. Many long-haul drivers bring a dog along to fight the soul-crushing loneliness of the endless road. But in states like New Jersey, an unrestrained pet inside the cab can land a trucker a hefty distracted driving ticket, heavily penalized under laws originally designed for people texting. Even if the golden retriever is just sleeping peacefully on the passenger seat, an officer can ruin your week. Why does a quiet napping dog warrant the exact same severe penalty as watching a movie on your phone? 8. If you buy a massive commercial-style truck just to tow your personal luxury RV, you must display a sticker reading "Not for hire" on the side. Without this oddly defensive declaration, law enforcement will assume you are secretly running a commercial freight business without the proper permits and insurance. You are legally required to broadcast to the entire world that you are simply on vacation, just so the Department of Transportation does not fine you into oblivion for possessing an excessively large vehicle. 9. In many major metropolitan areas, commercial trucks are strictly forbidden from entering the far left lane of a highway, typically reserved as the fast lane. The logic seems sound until you encounter a highway exit that is inexplicably located on the left side of the road. Truckers must then execute a frantic, technically illegal lane change across heavy traffic, breaking the law just to follow their designated delivery route. It is a brilliant piece of urban planning that essentially forces professional drivers to choose between missing their exit or breaking the law. 10. To maintain a commercial driver's license, you must pass a Department of Transportation physical exam, which involves a doctor scrutinizing everything from your blood pressure to your peripheral vision. But the bizarre part is the completely subjective nature of the sleep apnea test. If a medical examiner simply looks at a driver and decides their neck circumference is a bit too large, they can legally force the driver to undergo an incredibly expensive, multi-night sleep study before allowing them back behind the wheel. 11. Imagine finishing a grueling 60-hour work week, parking your rig for a mandatory weekend reset, and buying a six-pack of beer to stash in your mini-fridge. Congratulations, you just became a federal outlaw. The sleeper berth is essentially a trucker's living room, but the Department of Transportation strictly forbids possessing alcohol inside a commercial motor vehicle. Even if the keys are hidden away and you are watching Netflix, an unopened beer can cost your career. Does handing over your off-the-clock freedom sound like the American dream to you? 12. California proudly mandates a strict 55-mile-per-hour speed limit for 18-wheelers, while passenger cars legally fly by at 70 or higher. It sounds like a fantastic safety measure on paper, but this brilliant piece of legislation essentially turns massive commercial trucks into rolling, hazardous roadblocks. It creates a terrifying slalom course of frustrated drivers constantly swerving around 80,000-pound metal giants. Ironically, by trying to slow down the big rigs, the law generates vastly more dangerous traffic friction. 13. Driving a commercial truck in New York is a geographical minefield thanks to the highly deceptive concept of the parkway. Decades ago, these scenic roads were explicitly designed for leisurely Sunday drives, meaning their picturesque stone overpasses were built deliberately low. If a modern trucker blindly trusts a standard car GPS today, they will be legally forbidden from the road just seconds before an antique bridge violently peels the roof off their trailer like a tin can. The local law bans the trucks, but the low bridges ruthlessly execute the penalty. 14. You have almost certainly seen those stern signs at the edges of small towns reading "no engine brakes." When a heavy rig descends a steep hill, the driver activates a system that safely slows the massive vehicle without incinerating the wheel brakes. The only catch is that it sounds like a literal machine gun going off. Municipal law basically demands that truckers risk a catastrophic brake failure and an unstoppable runaway missile, purely so the local neighborhood association can sleep in peace. Whose life are you willing to risk for a quiet Tuesday night? 15. Several northeastern states enacted aggressive laws making it a severe criminal offense if snow or ice flies off the roof of your vehicle and strikes someone. For a regular sedan, you just grab a snow brush. But a commercial trailer is 13.5 feet tall. Strict workplace safety rules make it a fireable offense for a driver to climb on top of a slippery, icy trailer roof without a harness. Truckers are fined if the ice falls off, but penalized if they climb up to clear it. How do the brilliant minds in government expect them to win this unwinnable game? 16. Florida takes its beloved oranges so incredibly seriously that it borders on paranoia. Every single commercial truck entering the Sunshine State is legally required to pull into an agricultural inspection station. The state assumes everyone is smuggling invasive pests. You could be hauling absolutely nothing but empty cardboard boxes or bowling balls, and you still have to wait in line to prove you are not hiding a rogue fruit fly. Bypass this mandatory checkpoint by accident, and Highway Patrol will literally hunt you down like a dangerous fugitive escaping a heist. 17. Navigating California is tough enough, but the state enforces a highly technical geometry test known as the Kingpin Law. The law dictates that the distance from the trailer kingpin, the pivot point connecting it to the cab, to the center of the rear axle, cannot exceed exactly 40 feet. Truckers frequently slide their rear axles all the way back to safely balance heavy loads. If they simply forget to slide those wheels forward before crossing the state line, They are slapped with a massive budget-ruining fine for a legally unapproved turning radius. 18. Hauling hazardous materials turns a standard road trip into a terrifying rolling legal puzzle. If you carry certain types of flammable chemicals, you are strictly banned from driving through major enclosed tunnels, like the famous Eisenhower Tunnel in Colorado. Drivers must completely reroute their heavy rigs over treacherous, winding, high-altitude mountain passes instead. The law firmly prefers that you risk sliding off a snowy cliff with a tank full of explosive liquid rather than risking a spill safely inside an enclosed tunnel. Which disaster scenario makes more sense? 19. You might enjoy a heavily tinted window to block the harsh afternoon sun, but for a trucker, it is a mathematical trap waiting to spring. Federal regulations mandate that a commercial truck's side windows must allow exactly 70% of normal light transmission to pass through. State troopers actually carry handheld light meters to check this. If you apply a basic UV film to protect your skin from cancer, and it blocks 71% of the light, you are slapped with a massive fine. 20. You might own your truck, and you might legally own your house, but local zoning laws firmly dictate that the two can never meet. Many suburban municipalities outright ban truckers from parking their own cab in their private driveway. Even if the massive trailer is left at a depot and the cab perfectly fits on the concrete pad, it is classified by law as a commercial eyesore. Professional drivers often pay out of pocket for expensive off-site parking miles away, just because their neighbors think a shiny rig ruins the perfectly manicured aesthetic of the cul-de-sac. 21. Colorado has a highly specific winter law that sounds like a medieval punishment. Between September and May, commercial trucks traveling on Interstate 70 must physically carry tire chains, regardless of whether the sun is shining and the birds are singing. If a sudden blizzard hits and you do not have those heavy metal chains in your rig, you are facing a jaw-dropping fine of over $1,000. It is essentially forcing drivers to haul around a heavy, noisy security blanket for 9 months out of the year, just in case the sky falls. 22. Can the sky actually make you a criminal? Absolutely. If a trucker hauling an open flatbed load gets caught in a torrential downpour or a heavy snowstorm, the accumulated water and ice can add hundreds of pounds to the vehicle's total gross weight. When they roll onto the scale at a state weigh station, that extra rainwater pushes them over the legal limit. You can be fined thousands of dollars purely because it rained while you were driving. 23. When a massive semi-truck breaks down on a pitch-black highway, the driver is thrown into a terrifying race against the clock. Federal law explicitly dictates you have exactly 10 minutes to exit the cab and place 3 reflective emergency triangles at specific distances behind the trailer. Even if cars are blowing past you at 80 miles per hour in the dead of night, you still have to play Frogger on the asphalt. Fail to hit that 10-minute mark, and you are technically a federal offender. 24. The classic cinematic image of a trucker involves them swearing like a sailor over the CB radio. Surprisingly, the Federal Communications Commission officially classifies the Citizens Band radio network as a public utility, meaning that broadcasting profanity, playing music, or even whistling over the airwaves is technically a federal offense. While it is rarely enforced today, an angry FCC agent could legally hit a driver with a massive fine just for dropping an F-bomb during a frustrating traffic jam. 25. Truckers do not just worry about the total weight of their vehicle. They have to stress about where every single pound is sitting. The Federal Bridge. Gross weight formula is a math equation so complex it looks like it belongs on a chalkboard at MIT. It restricts the amount of weight that can be placed on any given set of axles to prevent bridges from collapsing. A driver can be perfectly under the legal total weight limit, but if the load shifts slightly during transit, they suddenly become a criminal at the next weigh station. 26. Utah enacted a wildly specific winter driving law that essentially turns the interstate into a forced low-speed parade. If 3 or more snowplows are working in a staggered formation across the highway, it is strictly illegal for any commercial vehicle to attempt to pass them. You are legally required to crawl behind them at whatever agonizingly slow speed they choose. It ensures safety, sure, but it also instantly obliterates a trucker's tightly scheduled delivery window without any legal recourse. 27. Imagine driving a load of groceries across the country, arriving at the warehouse, and being told you have to pay random workers hundreds of dollars in cash just to take the cargo off your truck. This bizarre, legally sanctioned extortion is called a lumper fee. Federal law actually allows warehouse workers, known as lumpers, to charge drivers out of pocket to unload the very freight the warehouse ordered. Why on earth is the delivery guy paying the recipient to accept the delivery? 28. Commercial drivers absolutely cannot just rely on Google Maps. Local governments establish invisible, highly complex networks of designated truck routes. If a driver misses a turn and veers just one single block off the approved commercial route onto a regular residential street, they can be ambushed by local police and fined upwards of $1,000. You are not penalized for causing damage. You are fined simply because your tires briefly touched unapproved, bureaucratic asphalt. 29. Arizona features a fascinating piece of legislation affectionately known as the stupid motorist law. If a trucker ignores a police barricade and gets their massive rig stuck in a flooded roadway, they do not just get a standard traffic ticket. The law forces the driver or their parent company to pay entirely out of pocket for the massive cost of the emergency rescue operation. When your mistake requires a helicopter and a swift water rescue team, that becomes one profoundly expensive wrong turn. 30. The federal 14-hour rule is an unrelenting, unforgiving digital stopwatch. Once a driver turns on their engine for the day, they have exactly 14 hours to complete up to 11 hours of driving. But here is the pure insanity. That clock never stops. If a disorganized warehouse makes a driver wait 6 hours at a loading dock, those hours burn away forever. The law stubbornly forces exhausted drivers to race against a ticking clock instead of simply allowing them to pause their shift and take a nap. 31. If you are driving a heavy truck through Georgia, do not even think about taking the most direct route through Atlanta. City law explicitly bans all commercial vehicles from traveling inside the Interstate 285 perimeter unless they are making a direct, verifiable local delivery. You are legally forced to take a massive, highly congested bypass around the entire city limits, burning extra fuel and wasting hours just because local lawmakers decided your truck ruined the downtown aesthetic. 32. Modern diesel trucks require a special chemical called diesel exhaust fluid to meet federal emission standards. If the truck runs out of this magical liquid, environmental laws force the vehicle's computer to automatically derate the engine, instantly capping the truck's speed at a pathetic 5 miles per hour. Imagine cruising down a busy interstate and your engine suddenly decides to act like a golf cart because of an emission sensor. The law essentially creates an immediate, terrifying highway hazard just to keep the exhaust a little cleaner. 33. If a trucker detaches their trailer to drive the bare cab to a grocery store, they use a legal status called personal conveyance. But here is the trap. If a safety auditor later decides that your evening grocery run subtly moved the truck closer to your next morning's pickup location, they will legally classify your dinner trip as illegal, unpaid commercial driving. Buying a frozen pizza and some soda can magically mutate into a severe federal hours of service violation that haunts your permanent record. 34. Every commercial truck must display its Department of Transportation registration number on the door. But the law does not specify a standardized font size in inches. It merely states the numbers must be highly contrasting and legible from exactly 50 feet away while the vehicle is stationary. This means your legal compliance is entirely dependent on the personal eyesight of whatever state trooper pulls you over. If the officer forgot his prescription glasses that morning, congratulations, you are suddenly a commercial criminal. 35. Have you ever noticed that heavy steel bumper hanging low off the back of every semi-trailer? It is legally required to prevent passenger cars from sliding underneath in a rear-end crash. However, federal inspectors measure the precise geometry of these underride guards with ruthless accuracy. If a trucker slightly bends that steel bar by slowly backing into a steep, poorly designed loading dock, the trailer instantly becomes illegal to pull. A harmless cosmetic dent can ground 80,000 pounds of freight indefinitely. 36. To hold a commercial license, drivers must carry an actively valid medical certificate from a specialized doctor. If a driver's medical card expires at exactly midnight, and they are pulled over at 1 minute past midnight while just 10 miles from their own house, the state instantly downgrades their license to a standard car permit. In the blink of an eye, they are legally driving a massive commercial vehicle without a valid commercial license, facing catastrophic fines. Would you want your entire livelihood hanging on a stroke of midnight? 37. High-altitude mountain passes present a spectacular legal catch-22 for winter driving. During active storms, highway patrols legally mandate that truckers install heavy steel chains on their tires or face massive fines. But if the snow suddenly melts a few miles down the road and those thick steel chains scratch the bare asphalt before the driver can find a safe shoulder to remove them, the state will aggressively fine the driver for damaging public property. You are heavily penalized for not having them, and ruthlessly punished for using them. 38. Most states proudly use modern digital transponders to track commercial vehicles and collect taxes, but Oregon treats its borders like a fortified medieval kingdom. If an out-of-state truck enters Oregon without a pre-purchased annual weight permit, the driver must physically stop at the border port of entry, park the rig, and buy a temporary paper receipt. If a driver accidentally bypasses this mandatory physical toll booth at 2 in the morning, the state treats them like a brazen smuggler actively avoiding taxation. 39. Standard traffic tickets usually vanish from your record after you pay the fine and take a boring defensive driving class, but not for truckers. Under the federal compliance system, even a minor written warning for a burnt-out license plate bulb stays permanently attached to a driver's federal safety score for 3 agonizing years. This means a $3 piece of dead glass can actually prevent a highly experienced professional driver from getting hired by a top-tier freight company. 40. Thanks to strict food safety modernization laws, a trailer that hauled fresh produce yesterday must be certifiably washed before hauling dry paper towels today. The driver must secure a physical piece of paper proving the metal box was sanitized by a certified facility. If a driver loses that single piece of paper, the receiving warehouse is legally required to reject the entire shipment of perfectly clean, non-perishable goods. One missing signature can cause thousands of dollars of freight to be treated like toxic waste. Does a roll of toilet paper really need a surgically sterilized environment? 41. A standard commercial medical certificate is usually valid for a couple of years, but a single stressful morning can completely derail it. During a mandatory physical exam, if a driver's blood pressure spikes just a tiny fraction above the strict government-approved threshold, purely because they drank a strong coffee beforehand, the doctor legally downgrades their license to a temporary 3-month permit. Should a professional driver's entire livelihood really depend on whether they enjoyed a double espresso before their morning medical appointment? 42. Backing a massive 70-foot vehicle into a tight loading dock is an art form. Often, poorly designed warehouses force drivers to back in on their blind side, meaning they literally cannot see the dock from the driver's seat. If the driver scrapes a wall or bends a fence during this impossible maneuver, the law places 100% of the liability on the trucker. There is absolutely no legal defense for a facility possessing a terribly engineered yard. The driver always pays for the architect's incompetence. 43. If you drive a sports car, having a radar detector might save you a speeding ticket. If you drive a commercial truck, possessing one is a severe federal offense. The law does not just ban using them. It bans simply having them inside the cab. Even if the device is unplugged, powered off, and buried at the bottom of a duffel bag under your dirty laundry, a DOT officer can legally cite you for possessing an illegal countermeasure. Why is an unplugged piece of plastic treated like contraband? 44. Hauling an oversized load like a giant wind turbine blade requires escort cars with flashing lights and bright warning flags. But every state wildly disagrees on the aesthetics of safety. One state legally requires the escort vehicle to have a flashing amber light and red flags. The neighboring state might explicitly ban red flags and demand orange ones instead. Truckers must frequently pull over on the shoulder of a dangerous interstate just to change the color of a piece of cloth to avoid thousands of dollars in fines. 45. Team driving allows a truck to keep moving continuously, with one person driving while the other sleeps in the back. But the Department of Transportation dictates that the sleeping driver must be strapped into their mattress with a heavy-duty safety net. If an inspector pulls the truck over and finds the co-driver peacefully sleeping without being tightly strapped into this web like a captured spider, the driver receives a serious safety violation. Imagine trying to get a restful night's sleep while buckled into your own bed. 46. We previously mentioned agricultural exemptions, but the federal law regarding live bees is pure comedy. Because bees can quickly overheat and die if a truck stops moving, the government grants drivers transporting live bees a massive exemption from standard exhaustion and hours of service rules. They are legally encouraged to just keep driving to save the cargo. Does it not terrify you that lawmakers care significantly more about a tired insect than a severely sleep-deprived human operating 80,000 pounds of rolling steel? 47. Railroad crossings are a unique nightmare for heavy rigs. Federal law strictly prohibits a commercial vehicle from shifting gears while crossing train tracks to prevent stalling. Furthermore, if a trucker misjudges the traffic ahead and their back bumper is left hanging even an inch over the tracks when the lights start flashing, they face catastrophic federal fines and immediate license suspension. The law demands perfect clairvoyance of traffic flow before your front tires ever touch the steel rails. 48. A commercial tire is thoroughly inspected down to the microscopic level. The law dictates that steer tires must have exactly 4/32 of an inch of tread depth. A transportation officer will stick a tiny metal gauge into the rubber grooves. If a single sharp rock happened to wear down one isolated millimeter of rubber to 3/32 of an inch, the entire massive vehicle is immediately placed out of service. One bad pebble can literally shut down a cross-country delivery. 49. When a trucker drops off their trailer and drives just the cab, it is called bobtailing. You might think driving a smaller, trailerless cab makes you subject to standard car laws, but you would be horribly wrong. Many scenic routes and parkways explicitly ban commercial vehicles. Even if you have no trailer, no freight, and are completely off-duty trying to reach a nearby hotel, your bare cab is still legally classified as a commercial nuisance. You are banned from the road simply for how your vehicle looks. Alright, we have covered 49 points, and there is only one final rule left. But before we transition to number 50, it is time for our final verdict. In our opinion, the award for the absolute most unbelievable regulation on today's list goes to point number 46, the live bee exemption. Simply because the idea of the federal government officially declaring that an overheated bug is more important than a fully rested, safe truck driver is a masterpiece of bureaucratic absurdity. Do you agree with our verdict? Or perhaps another point on this list deserved that questionable honor? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And now, our final number. 50. The electronic logging device tracking a trucker's every move is merciless. If a driver parks at a crowded truck stop for their mandatory 10-hour sleep break, they legally cannot move the vehicle. If another truck needs to get out and asks our driver to pull forward just 15 feet to make room, the digital system automatically registers the movement as driving. That tiny parking lot adjustment instantly destroys the legal rest period, forcing the exhausted driver to completely restart their 10-hour clock from zero. So that is 50 wildly confusing laws keeping our supply chain moving. It makes you wonder how anything gets delivered at all. Do you think the government is deliberately overregulating truckers to collect fine revenue? Or are these strict rules genuinely necessary for our safety? Let us know your verdict in the comments below. If this list changed how you see the highway, hit that like button and subscribe for more mind-bending facts.